Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. The story begins in a world where monsters called Nemesis fall from the sky, bringing fear and death to all humans they touch. Even those who do survive their touch are permanently scarred. The cursed are known as sorcerers, and are at times more fearsome than the Nemesis themselves. We then meet the apprentice sorcerer named Seth, who runs to meet with a boy named Tommy, who he promised he would show his magic to. Seth could only show his magic where no one else could see, and promises to do his best to make up for being late. Tommy is concerned to see some books he assumes Seth took from someone named Alma, but Seth says it'll be fine. The first spell fails, and the next one embarrassingly fails as well. Seth decides that those spells are boring anyway, and states he will show Tommy some original magic that he came up with himself. Seth powers up this spell and unleashes what he calls the Titan Punch that sends a boulder flying. Tommy is amazed, but they are both surprised to see that Seth has angered some cows, and Tommy laments how bad things always happen when he hangs out with Seth. In town, we see Alma, who is a freelance sorcerer, get upset at a vendor who refuses to sell to sorcerers. She explains to him that he actually doesn't have a choice and threatens to blow up his shop if he doesn't do as she says. The vendor obeys her orders, but Alma steps outside to see Seth causing trouble again. The townspeople can't believe Seth is at it again, but Seth calmly explains that he has the situation under control. Seth thinks to himself that things should be okay as long as Alma doesn't find out, but realizes she is right there. Alma uses her magic to settle the situation down and tells Seth that he can't keep causing trouble, so he will be punished later. The townspeople are furious as they blame the filthy sorcerers for what happened, and Seth tries to explain that it was only him. He states that Alma was the one that saved them, but the townspeople don't care. They call them infected good-for-nothings and state that their kind only make trouble. They don't want any sorcerers in their town and tell Tommy to stay away from them. Alma surprisingly just offers to pay for the damage and explains to Seth that talking to them won't do any good at this point. The townspeople want to keep putting them down, but Alma uses magic to get away. Seth can't understand why they talk to her like that since it was his fault, but she reminds him that those people are afraid of them. That night, Seth does his punishment as Alma lists all the trouble he has caused recently. She forbids him from going back to that island and reveals that she knows he has been taking her grimoires. She demands that he stop that as well, so he explains that he only took them so he could become a respectable sorcerer, but she states that he hasn't even become a respectable person yet. Seth can't understand why she let the townspeople talk to her that way, but she only explains that they see them the same way they see the Nemesis that bring disaster upon humanity. They see them as monsters, but Seth still can't understand as Alma is one of the people destroying the Nemesis. Alma is certain that things would be different if all the Nemesis were defeated, which makes Seth think, but Alma points out that nothing good ever comes from Seth's thoughts. Just then, Alma feels a sharp pain but hides it. Seth then asks for a pee break, but is shocked to hear it denied. In bed, Seth thinks about defeating all the Nemesis, and decides that becoming a great sorcerer like Alma is the only way. The next day, Seth continues practicing, and Tommy explains that his mother told him not to play with sorcerers. Seth says it's just because they don't know how awesome magic is, and states that he plans to become a Nemesis hunter. Seth explains that the Nemesis attack people all around the world, and Alma has been fighting them for a really long time. Just then, they see something falling from the sky, and Seth recognizes it from a book as a Nemesis egg. This is horrible as it's headed straight towards the town, and Alma's out fighting Nemesis on another island at the moment, but Seth decides that he will fight it since he is a sorcerer too. Everyone in town is then shocked as a giant egg lands right in front of them. Seth heads home and loads up on items that include an explosive bottle, healing potions, magic talisman, magic swords, and more. However, he quickly realizes that he is far too heavy for the bats carrying him. Tommy arrives in town to explain that what they are looking at is a Nemesis egg, and everyone panics. They realize that getting help from the royal capital would take too long, and decide that Alma should be the one to take care of it. They state that sorcerers are already infected by the Nemesis, and further contact with a Nemesis won't kill them. They think it's time for her to finally make herself useful, and are shocked when they think another egg has fallen. It isn't another egg, however, and it's actually Seth. Seth explains that all their worries will be gone now that he is there, and explains that he can take care of the Nemesis without Alma's help. Seth plans to just roll the egg off the edge of the island, but is shocked to see that it's already hatching. The egg hatches, but Seth remains calm and attacks it with the exploding bottle. The Nemesis is completely unharmed, so Seth resorts to the magic sword, but it fails him as he gets hit. Seth realizes just how strong it is, and Tommy foolishly tries to help. The nemesis turns its attention to Tommy, so Seth pulls himself up and manages to rescue him just in time. This only puts Seth in a very tough spot, so he tells Tommy to run immediately. It's clear that Seth can barely hold on, so Tommy runs and asks for someone to help him. The townspeople can only watch in fear though. Seth is being crushed by the nemesis, but he refuses to give up, and states that this is his chance to show them all that sorcerers aren't bad people. Seth struggles to stand up, but continues to say that he doesn't want people to talk down to Alma anymore. The townspeople just continue to watch, so Tommy cries for someone to help, and his prayers are answered as an attack falls from the sky. A man's voice calls out his attack's name, Bravery Destroyer, as another immensely powerful attack strikes the nemesis. Attacks continue to rain down, and the man finally reveals himself. He commends Seth for his bravery, but explains that sorcerers still have to help each other out. Seth is amazed to see other sorcerers, and they easily stop the nemesis. The man explains that they are 4 wandering nemesis hunters, and they introduce themselves as the Bravery Quartet, but their leader scolds one of them for messing up their pose. Their leader introduces himself as Don Bossman, and shocks everyone when he explains that they're there to save them. Seth thinks about how Alma is the only other sorcerer he has ever seen, and desperately asks to fight with Don and the others. Don agrees as he was impressed with Seth's bravery, but the townspeople don't trust Seth. They explain that he is just trouble, but Don states that they are the same since they are both sorcerers. Don explains that the quartet will go around town to help everyone evacuate, and instructs Seth to distract the nemesis as a decoy. Seth wants to try to defeat it instead, but Don explains that that's too reckless, and being smart is part of being a real sorcerer. They part ways, and Seth decides to try to use his Titan Punch. It doesn't work though, as Seth realizes that the nemesis can change from hard to soft. He does his job as a decoy though, as the nemesis chases him throughout the town. Any attempt to attack the creature fails however, and Seth remembers that he needs to fight smarter. At a nearby bank, Tommy informs his father of the nemesis, and the Bravery Quartet arrives soon after. Don is disappointed to see people still there and tells them that they will have to leave. Back at the fight, Seth is glad to have found some chains and continues being a decoy. However, this time he lures the nemesis and traps it using the chains. He tells it that it can no longer do evil, but it grunts at him and shows that it has another much more powerful attack. Elsewhere, Alma heads back, annoyed that the people that called for her help just mistook some wild animals for a nemesis. As she approaches the island, she gets a very unpleasant feeling. She begins to rush back and hopes that Seth hasn't done anything rash. In the village, we see the aftermath of the nemesis' devastating attack. Seth remembers that Alma told him that Nemesis can use magic, but he never imagined it would be this strong. Seth then hears Tommy scream in the distance, and we see that he and the others have been tied up. The townspeople now realize that the Bravery Quartet just wanted to rob them during the chaos, and state that they were right about how terrible sorcerers are. The quartet point out that they have made a fortune, and laugh in the faces of the townspeople. However, Seth arrives to question what they are doing. Don thanks Seth for being a decoy, so the people think Seth was part of the robbery, and accuse Seth of becoming friends with Tommy just because his father worked at the bank. Don explains that they aren't Nemesis hunters, and are actually treasure hunters that take advantage when Nemesis appear. Don mocks Seth for being so gullible, and Seth points out that the duty of all sorcerers is to fight the Nemesis. Don sighs as he explains that there is no value in fighting for normal people, and sorcerers like themselves are blamed for every bad thing that happens. He points out how they are treated like infected creatures, just as the townspeople begin to scream at Seth. They blame him for being the reason that the Nemesis appeared in the first place, and call him infected scum. This only proves Don's point further, as he points out how Seth just finished fighting until he was battered from head to toe, and still all they do is shout nasty things at him. The people don't even think of thanking him, and as far as they are concerned, sorcerers are the same as Nemesis. Don is sure that Seth knows exactly what he is talking about, and reminds him that it's best to be smart. He states that being rich is the smartest way to live, and the quartet decide to leave before the Nemesis appears there. Don gives Seth a parting gift since they are the same, while he has a good laugh, but Seth shocks everyone as he punches Don in the face. Seth fights them as he states that the sorcerer he wants to become is nothing like the pathetic losers they are, but he is instantly stopped by one of the quartet. His name is Gigi, and Don explains that his magic is terrifying, and he would be the group's leader if he wasn't such a moron. Don decides to not finish Seth off, as he is certain that Seth will one day realize he is right about everything, but Seth refuses to be put on their level. Just then, Don sees that the Nemesis has responded to Gigi's magic, and they begin to leave, but the townspeople point out that they will all die if they don't untie them. The quartet prepare to leave anyway, and Don tells Seth that he better take off and leave everyone too, if he doesn't want to die. The townspeople can only cry out in fear as the Nemesis prepares its immense attack, but Seth uses every bit of strength he has to get up. He tells Tommy that everything will be okay, and he won't leave them. Everyone watches in disbelief as Seth turns to face the Nemesis, and he thinks about Don's words just as the Nemesis is about to unleash its energy beam. He reiterates that they will never be the same, and the sorcerer he wants to become is an amazing sorcerer who protects everyone. The Nemesis releases its absolutely devastating attack as the quartet are in awe of its immense power, and they state that the townspeople are all goners. Don bids farewell to the foolish Seth, but they are all then shocked to see, amidst the blinding light, that Seth is blocking the attack and protecting everyone. Don points out how what they are witnessing is impossible, as Seth could barely use magic, and he wonders what Seth really is. The Nemesis begins preparing its next attack, but Seth won't let it have its way, and uses his Titan Punch to punch a hole right through it. Everyone is in disbelief to see that Seth actually managed to defeat it, and Don is amazed at how Seth used magic barehanded. The Nemesis isn't finished just yet, but Seth can't even move anymore. Luckily though, an attack rains from above to finish it off, and the very upset Alma tells her young apprentice to just rest now. Seth would later wake up, and Alma scolds him for using magic barehanded. This isn't something that normal sorcerers can do. She explains that an organization called the Inquisition hates people that aren't normal when it comes to magic, and she assumes that the townspeople are probably already contacting them. Seth points out that they just saved the townspeople and refuses to believe that they would betray them. Alma thinks back to just after she captured the Bravery Quartet, and Tommy returned the pieces of Seth's gloves while thanking them for saving the town. Alma tells Seth that normal people and infected like them will never understand each other. Seth then shocks her when he states that he will defeat all the Nemesis so no one else will get infected, and that people won't have to be afraid. She points out that far too many Nemesis exist in this world, so Seth decides that he will just have to find their nest and destroy it. Alma points out that that place is called Radiant, but it's just a legend. Legend or not, Seth vows to find it, pointing out that the Nemesis fall down as eggs, so there must be some place where those eggs are being laid. Alma decides that if he wants to defeat Nemesis so bad, then she will let him help her the next time she hunts one, but warns that villagers will probably fear them and run them out of town. This upsets Seth greatly as he hates to see sorcerers treated that way, but she settles him down and has him rest. When alone, Alma thinks about how it's been over 10 years since she met Seth, and states that those memories are stained in red, the color of flames that engulf everything. Her memory shows her waking up from passing out after being gravely injured. She couldn't remember a single thing and was told that she was found holding a boy as if to protect him. She states that after she lost everything, all that remained to her was a child she had no recollection of. After her wounds healed, she took Seth with her on her journey to ask anyone they saw if they had any recollection of her or Seth. The answer was always no, and she lamented how most people wouldn't even listen to what she had to say. Alma's sharp pain would bring her to her knees, but she would tell Seth that it's the usual headache that her curse gives, and tells him not to fuss about it. Being a sorcerer meant that she survived contact with the Nemesis, received its curse, and gained the power to use magic, which they call Fantasia. Seth is a sorcerer as well, but mostly he was just a burden to her at that time, and she regularly had thoughts of just leaving him behind. However, he was the only lead she had to finding her past, so she couldn't leave him, but explains that an incident would soon occur. Alma explains that she was just starting to make a living as a Nemesis hunter and left Seth home alone one day so she could hunt a Nemesis. While alone, a group of kids would bully Seth and blame him for being the reason the town's livestock died. Seth tried to explain that it was the Nemesis that did it, but they just began to beat him relentlessly while they stated that beating up bad guys is the right thing to do. Seth's power would eventually erupt, causing Alma to immediately sense something was wrong. Back at the village, Seth has been tied up, and the villagers want to burn him alive since they fear that if a monster like him touches them, then they will be infected too. However, they are shocked as their torches go out and Alma appears to touch a villager's face. She points out that he must be cursed now and they all run in fear, but she laughs at how it is clearly not true. She freed Seth, who cried in her arms, and she realized for the first time how small and helpless he was. She knew she had to protect him and wouldn't let anyone treat him like a bad guy ever again. Alma no longer wandered aimlessly. She still wanted to regain her memory, but now had something more important. What she needed was a place where she could protect Seth, where no one could threaten or hurt him anymore. The rest of the world continued to run them off just as before, but when they did, they would just let the wind take them on a new journey. Alma looks at his old clothes and realizes how much he has grown up since then. The next day, Seth tries to sneak out, but Alma stops him. Seth says that it won't do any good trying to stop him, but Alma shocks him when she reveals that she won't. She knows that he wants to go look for Radiant, and asks what his plan to find it without any leads is, but is shocked to hear him say that with enough spirit, he will make it work. Seth is then shocked as she gives him her broom, and the gloves that have been patched up. She makes him promise her one thing though, and that is to make sure that he never becomes a monster. He agrees and promises to become the greatest sorcerer instead. He eagerly begins his adventure, but stops and rushes back to Alma filled with emotion. Seth thanks her for everything she has done, so she asks him to take care, and Seth takes off on his journey. Alma watches him leave as she can no longer hold back her tears, and thinks about how great of a burden he was. Seth's journey has officially begun, and he speaks to Radiant as he threatens to destroy it no matter what. Sometime later, several members of the Inquisition gather and discuss how all their hunts have gone recently. General Torque, the one that is referred to as the Beast, arrives, and states that it goes without saying why he has gathered them all there. He has everyone's attention as he states that the day before, just outside an island, a certain sorcerer with horns was found on the sea. Thanks for watching part 1, 3,000 likes and I'll make a part 2. And if you really liked the video, then make sure you comment too so the video can do well, which would help meet the like goal.